Hello everyone. Today's video is about neurofeedback and why neurofeedback actually works on our brains. It's a form of brain training and there's lots of stimuli around us all the time. So why is it that neurofeedback works but other day-to-day stimuli don't impact our brains in the same way? So just before jumping into the video, if you don't mind taking a quick moment to please like, share, subscribe, and or post a quick comment on the video, I'd really appreciate it. So thanks in advance for taking a second to do that. And as per usual, nothing I'm saying should be construed as medical advice. This is for informational purposes only. If you need medical advice, please talk to your healthcare provider to get that advice. So the question goes something like this. Could you please elaborate on how/why the brain changes stick when one is using neurofeedback? I was explaining the process and the comment was made that if my brain is able to be changed during neurofeedback, why is it not able to change back again? So it's a very good question. So just for a little bit of context, and I have to say I'm excited about this question because I think it's the first question that I've had about neurofeedback. So I posted a video on my YouTube channel, and it's also one of my podcast episodes. I posted it about a month ago in very early January, all about brain mapping and neurofeedback. So if you're interested in learning more about that, it's an hour and 15 long minute video slash podcast episode. It goes over what brain mapping is, what neurofeedback is. It's a PowerPoint presentation, so there's images of what the reports look like and what they mean and this and that. So it's a fairly thorough look at this topic. So if you're interested in learning more, please check that out. So basically with neurofeedback, what's essentially happening is we're setting a computer program to, with certain parameters to basically tell the computer program, we want these brainwave changes in this individual. And then the person is hooked up with these sensors on their heads, which are reading their brainwaves in real time. And when the computer software detects, reading the brainwaves, detects that the brainwaves are doing what we want them to, then the person during this time is sitting there with their eyes closed with these sensors on their head. And when the computer software detects that the brain is doing what we want it to, based on what we've kind of pre-programmed into the software, so say if the person's in sympathetic overdrive, way too much sympathetic nervous system function, not enough parasympathetic nervous system function, so we might, in that case, would probably tell the software, okay, we want to lower the sympathetics and boost up the parasympathetics. So when the sensors detect that there's the brainwaves are doing what we want them to, then the person will hear music playing. So it's kind of rewarding the brain by playing music. And if the sensors detect that the brainwaves are not doing what we want them to, then that music will be taken away and the music will either be impossible to hear or be very, very quiet and barely able to hear it. So it's through this process of operant conditioning where the software is basically rewarding the brain when it's doing what we want it to, with say less sympathetics, more parasympathetics, and it takes that reward away when the brain's not doing what we want it to. So as I'm fond of saying to my patients when I'm describing this, it's very much like teaching a puppy how to do a trick, like to sit when you say sit. At first you say sit, the dog doesn't know what you're talking about, so you push its bum down to the ground, you give it a cookie, and when you do that the first few times, it has no idea why it's getting the cookie. It's just like, hey, I'm getting a cookie, this is great. It hasn't made the connection that it's getting the cookie because its bum's on the ground now, but eventually it learns, oh, when you say sit and I put my bum on the ground, I get a cookie, everybody's happy. In a similar, so it's operant conditioning. In a similar manner, we teach the brain that when you have, in this case, lower sympathetic nervous system function, higher parasympathetic nervous system function, then good things happen. You get to listen to music. When we listen to music, we get a little dopamine hit, and it makes the brain happy. So, anyways, that's the context for neurofeedback. So, as people do this neurofeedback training, very much like going to the gym, to say build bigger bicep muscles or trapezius muscles or quads or whatever it is that somebody wants to build up, then over time, as we do this neurofeedback training, just as if we keep going to the gym week after week, we get those bigger muscles. Well, as we do neurofeedback training, we start to entrain these new brainwave patterns. So in this example we've been using here, lowering the sympathetics and raising the parasympathetics. So as the brain is training in this way, getting that message that good things will happen if you have less sympathetic and more parasympathetic activity, then over time the brain will just start doing that naturally, just as you're doing those bicep curls, the muscles get bigger and stay bigger as long as you keep working them out. So that's the background context for this question. So then the question, if I'm understanding it correctly, is that, well, why is it that, where we're getting stimulation all the time, why is it that, okay, in my neurofeedback session, I'm getting this feedback, working with this process to lower the sympathetics, raise the parasympathetics. Why is it that when I, go out into the world, my brain isn't just kind of neurofeedback training all the time? So it's a really good question. And at the end of the day, our brains are being trained by our environments all the time. If a person's in a really stressful work environment, brain's getting trained to like be in a higher sympathetic tone and a lower parasympathetic tone, for example. Or if we're just kind of riled up all the time, we might have more, pro-inflammatory delta brain waves that are, present in higher concentrations during the day. So our environment does have an impact, but I think the question is ultimately, why is it that the effects of neurofeedback just aren't undone very, very easily, given that we're getting lots of stimulation all day, every day, and neurofeedback's only, typically half an hour once, maybe twice a week, sometimes a little more frequently in some cases. So the best way that I can think to describe this is, going back to our weightlifting analogy, if a person is, going to the gym, they're like, I'm going to work on my biceps, I'm going to lift a certain amount of weight, and I'm going to grab some 20-pound dumbbells, 40-pound dumbbells, whatever it is, I'm going to do a certain number of reps, I'm going to have a certain, my posture is going to be good, I'm isolating the muscle, all that good stuff. By doing that work in a very targeted, controlled way, then it's going to build bigger bicep muscles over time. Whereas if that same person is like, I want bigger biceps, and I eat 3 square meals a day. Every time I eat, I bring my fork from my plate up to my mouth. So that's kind of like a bicep curl motion as well. It's like, well, that eventually, if I do that for years and years and years, eventually I'll have big biceps. Like, no, you won't. That's not going to build up your biceps in a meaningful way because it's just not a targeted enough, it's not a heavy enough load. It's not a dedicated enough kind of movement to like specifically target those muscles in a meaningful way. Yes, like it will contribute a little bit to reducing, say muscle atrophy. If a person just sitting there with their arms immobilized all the time, like yes, even just lifting your arm to feed yourself will be helpful, but it's not a targeted enough, it's not a dedicated enough exercise, so to speak. And so similarly with the neurofeedback, it's a very, very controlled environment. It's specifically rewarding the brain with music while it's doing, while the brain waves are in a certain pattern. And so whenever the brain waves are in the right pattern, it's getting that reward, and this is happening many times over during that half-hour neurofeedback session. And then when it's weekly sessions being done, there's like lots and lots of specific training. It's a very specific training of certain brainwave patterns. So that's to my understanding the reason why. Why does neurofeedback training work? Well, and why is it that just day-to-day life doesn't undo everything I just did in my neurofeedback session or whatnot? Because it's just a very, very dedicated training experience, and it's not just through random happenstance that like as would happen with just day-to-day life brainwave fluctuations happening. I should say day-to-day life fluctuations and brain waves are a bit more, say, random in nature. We're not just like repeating things over and over, except again, if say like we're going to work every day, it's really stressful, or there's an unharmonious relationship and it's beating down on somebody's self-esteem or whatnot, or things like that. Like, yes, this is kind of real life neurofeedback, if you will. And then there could also be good things as well. If a child's always feels like loved and cared for whenever they get home from school and their parents are just wonderful, that's going to entrain certain brain waves. But those are of course more like general things that are trained over many months and years of experience, not nearly as concentrated and targeted as specifically working on brainwaves in a very meaningful, very intentional way with something like neurofeedback. So I hope that answers the question. If there's any follow-up questions to this one or any other topics on neurofeedback, I'm happy to answer those questions. Neurofeedback is something that I've been doing a lot of in my practice over the last several months, and it's been making a really great difference for a lot of patients, so very excited about it. I feel like it is one of the most targeted ways that we can directly impact the nervous system without needing to get into the wild, wonderful world of things like meditation and cognitive behavioral therapy and amygdala retraining, which are all wonderful things to do. But neurofeedback's a way of, in my opinion, fast tracking what we're trying to achieve with those therapies. Or for folks who are like, I just can't go there, I don't want to go there, with more like mindfulness-based approaches, it's a way of helping to directly strive to regulate the nervous system and support it in a number of different ways. So anyways, if you want to learn more about it, please check out that aforementioned YouTube video / podcast episode. If you're on YouTube, just plug in Brian Raid, brain mapping, neurofeedback, or the name of the podcast is Overcoming Chronic Illness. So just Overcoming Chronic Illness Brain Mapping episode will pop up. And it's the episode from, I believe it was January 1st or January 2nd of 2024 that I posted that episode. So if you want to check that out on Spotify or iTunes or Apple Podcast or Google Podcasts or whatever it happens to be, then it's there if you're interested. So again, thanks for the question. Any questions about any other topic, please feel free to post in the comment section, and I will do my best to answer as soon as I can.